In North America, we see a horse show performance starring a beautiful woman named Mila. She's accompanied by her husband, Jim, and their young daughter, Lucky. The three of them sit among the audience, watching Mila perform with her horse. Jim looks very proud of his wife's performance, while Lucky eagerly eats strawberries from a bowl in front of her. We learn she absolutely loves strawberries. Then, Mila attempts a risky stunt on her horse. But sadly, she falls and dies right in front of her husband and daughter. Jim is devastated by Mila's death. From that moment, he becomes deeply traumatized by horses and grows to hate them. Unable to raise Lucky on his own, he entrusts her upbringing to his sister Cora and his father, James. Jim moves back to his old home, cutting all ties with his daughter, and returns to work on the railroads, wanting to live independently from his father's influence. Years pass, and Lucky grows up in her grandfather James's house. By the time she turns 10, she's still living there, lonely, having lost her mother and been abandoned by her father. One day we see Lucky playing with a small squirrel in her room when Aunt Cora walks in. She tells Lucky to stop playing and focus on her physics studies. We also learn that Grandpa James is running for mayor of the town. Cora explains to Lucky that she needs to behave and appear presentable in front of the public to help James win the election. Lucky then confides in Cora, saying she's extremely bored because she has no friends and never leaves the house. She questions the point of studying physics, like calculating train speeds and distances, and insists that all the information she's learning seems pointless. Despite her doubts, Lucky continues studying. Just then, Grandpa James walks in and asks Cora to help him with his tie as he's expecting an important delegation of officials, journalists, and photographers who are coming to interview him. James explains to Cora that they'll be asking about his campaign and personal life, but he's worried Lucky might ruin the meeting and embarrass him. Cora reassures him that Lucky will behave and promises she won't cause any trouble. James and Cora leave the room. The squirrel returns, and Lucky tries to catch it again. The squirrel runs wild around the room, then jumps from the upper floor to the lower level. Lucky chases after it. Meanwhile, James is at the front door welcoming the delegation. As they enter the house, they're shocked to see Lucky hanging upside down from a rope tied to the ceiling. A large picture frame falls on her, knocking down a portrait of Grandpa James. Suddenly, the squirrel leaps onto James's face, and the photographers quickly snap pictures of the whole scene. The image is published on the front page of the newspaper. Embarrassed and angry, James decides to send Lucky to live with her father, Jim. So, Cora and Lucky board a train to go meet him. On the train, Cora is reading the newspaper, while Lucky looks very upset. She's being sent back to the father who abandoned her. She tells Cora that Jim never once asked about her in all the 6 years they were apart. She feels like her grandfather is punishing her by sending her back. Cora tries to comfort her, saying they're only going to stay with Jim for the summer until the election is over, and that he had no choice but to leave her back then. It wasn't just Jim's decision, but one made by the whole family. Still, Lucky refuses to believe it. She's convinced her father intentionally abandoned her. A little while later, Cora leaves to get a drink from the station. Lucky opens the train window and sees a rare and stunning wild horse running alongside the train, leading a herd of wild horses behind it. She's completely mesmerized, and it stirs something inside her. A deep connection to horses she inherited from her mother, Mila. Lucky leaves her compartment and starts moving from one train car to another, trying to keep up with the horse and its herd, which is now ahead of the train. Cora returns and panics when she notices Lucky is missing. She spots her from the train window, walking dangerously along the outer edge of the train. Cora rushes to the back of the train to try and save her. Meanwhile, Lucky reaches the last train car and watches the horse and its herd in awe. The horse approaches her, and she reaches out to touch it, but suddenly loses her balance and nearly falls. At the last second, a stranger named Hendrix appears and saves her. Hendrix tells Lucky that wild horses are very dangerous. Cora then arrives, thanks him for saving Lucky, and takes her back to their compartment. Shortly after, After a while, the train arrives at the station. Lucky appears visibly upset because her father didn't bother to come and greet them. Meanwhile, we see Hendrix getting off the train with his gang. He tells them he spotted a herd of wild horses nearby and suggests they capture and sell them. With the money, they could buy return tickets and even have a lot left over to spend. Lucky overhears Hendrix's plan and becomes very upset. She then learns about a nearby horse show and decides to sneak off while her aunt is distracted. At the show, she witnesses an impressive horse performance. The host of the event, named Granger, appears on stage with his daughter, Prue, who's also part of the show. We find out that Granger owns several horse stables and that his daughter inherited his love for horses. Prue notices Lucky in the crowd and instantly recognizes her as Mila's daughter due to the strong resemblance. She warmly greets her and gives her a scarf that once belonged to Lucky's mother. Lucky is deeply touched. Granger introduces his daughter, Prue, who performs a stunning routine with her horse. Soon after, Cora finds Lucky and tells her she was very worried when she disappeared. The two then try to figure out where Jam's house is. A young boy named Snips appears with his small donkey and offers to take them to the house for a single cent. Cora agrees and gives him the coin. Snips then points to a house, claiming it's the one they're looking for. Just then, his older sister Abigail appears, throws a rope to pull Snips back, and apologizes for her brother's behavior. She returns the cent to Cora and tells Lucky that her mother, Mila, was very well known in town. At that moment, Granger calls out for Prue to return to the show. Prue quickly says goodbye to Lucky and rushes off. On the way to Jam's house, Lucky tells her aunt about her sudden love for horses. She says it started when she saw two girls her age riding horses in the festival. But Cora quickly changes the subject. She doesn't want Lucky to get too attached to horses like her mother did. She believes Mila's love for horses is what led to her death. She trusted her horse too much and it betrayed her. When they arrive at the house, Jam welcomes them and takes Lucky upstairs to show her her new room. He had decorated it with strawberry-themed wallpaper because he remembered how much she loved strawberries as a child. He notices the scarf and asks where she got it. Lucky explains that a friend of her mother gave it to her. Jam tells her she's grown and looks a lot like Mila now. Suddenly, they hear Cora screaming. She's seen a mouse. Jam leaves to check on her while Lucky begins unpacking. As she puts her clothes away, she notices a small opening behind the wardrobe. She pushes it aside and finds a secret room filled with her mother's belongings: clothes, equipment, and old posters from her horse shows. Lucky lets her hair down and smiles, then hears the sound of a horse neighing, the same one she saw from the train. She opens the window and realizes the sound is coming from nearby. She quickly rushes out and heads toward the noise. She finds a stable next to an open area surrounded by a fence meant for horses. Inside the stable, she hears the horse again, and it sounds like it's in pain. She realizes this stable belongs to Granger's family and that he had rented it out to Hendrix and his gang. Suddenly, the stable doors burst open. The horse charges out with Hendrix riding it. It runs wildly, throws him off, and charges toward him. Hendrix narrowly escapes by jumping over the fence. Seeing Lucky, he warns her again that horses are dangerous. Then he and his gang regroup, tie the horse down with ropes, and begin to break and abuse it in an attempt to tame it. Meanwhile, Prue runs to her father and tells him what Hendrix is doing to the horse. Granger rushes over, furious, and yells at Hendrix and his gang, telling them he won't tolerate cruelty toward horses. Embarrassed, Hendrix apologizes. But later he tells his gang that if they manage to break this horse, they could sell it for a fortune. They decide to continue their plan the next day and leave the horse tied up. Once they're gone, Lucky sneaks back and unties the horse. She decides to name him Spirit. She then sits with Prue and the two girls bond and become friends. Later, Lucky returns home as night falls. During dinner with her father and aunt, Jam notices an old picture of his mother with a squirrel. Lucky expects him to be upset by the memory, but to her surprise, he laughs. Taking advantage of the light moment, Lucky tells him she wants to raise a horse. Jam immediately becomes upset, especially when he realizes she's talking about the wild, untamed horse in the nearby stable. The next day, Lucky wakes up and leaves the house heading to the stable to check on Spirit. She arrives and meets Prue, who starts talking to her about horses. Prue tells her that wild horses need special training and patience, and that Lucky must show Spirit she trusts him so they can get used to each other. And he becomes obedient because horses love when their owner shows confidence in them. After that, Lucky gives Spirit a potato to eat, but he refuses. Just then, Abigail arrives and hands Lucky an apple, suggesting she try feeding Spirit an apple instead. Spirit happily takes the apple from Lucky's hand, showing he loves apples, and Lucky is thrilled because Spirit finally eats from her hand. When Lucky returns home, she finds a box full of apples in front of the house. Jim had collected them from their garden. She takes the apples back to Spirit and keeps feeding him through the night. Spirit seems very happy with the care he's getting from Lucky. That night, we see Lucky sitting with her friends, Prue and Abigail. Then we cut to Hendrix, who is watching them from a distance. He observes how they treat the horse and realizes that Spirit has started to care for Lucky. The next day, Lucky rides Spirit for the first time. When Snips opens the stable door, Spirit suddenly bolts, running toward the mountains with Lucky on his back. Prue and Abigail quickly follow on their horses to rescue her. Meanwhile, Snips gets worried and rushes to tell her father, Jim, what happened. He tells him that the horse took Lucky and ran toward the mountains. Jim panics and, along with Granger, hurries off in that direction to save her. Back with Lucky, she's seen riding Spirit along the mountain cliffs, while Prue and Abigail trail behind, giving her instructions to keep her balance. When they notice the rest of the slope is broken, they tell Lucky to jump off Spirit quickly so they can catch her. Lucky jumps at the last second, and Spirit continues on alone. At that moment, Jim and Granger arrive at the scene. Jim is extremely worried about his daughter and scolds her for not listening to him. He takes her home, still upset, and tells her she's too stubborn and that he has decided to send her back to her grandfather, James. Lucky is heartbroken and tells him that he's abandoning her again. She runs to her room in tears. That night, Lucky sneaks out of the house without her father or aunt noticing. She takes some apples and walks into the forest, following the railway tracks until she meets Spirit and his herd. They gather around her as she feeds them the apples, and the horses seem happy and at peace. Suddenly, Hendrix and his gang appear, carrying ropes to capture the horses. Lucky tries to stop them, but Hendrix pushes her away. At that moment, the train arrives, and the gang begins loading the horses into the train cars and locking them in. They fail to capture Spirit. Before they leave, Lucky overhears them saying they're taking the horses to the port to smuggle them on a cargo ship. The train departs with the horses, and Lucky returns to the village with Spirit, who trusts her to help him rescue his family. She heads to Granger's stable and finds Prue there. Lucky tells her about Hendrix capturing the horses and says they must save them before they reach the cargo ship. Prue takes out a map and tells Lucky that the port is very far away and that if they follow the train, they won't make it in time. Lucky remembers the physics lessons she never liked and realizes their value now. She calculates the train's speed, distance, and travel time, and tells Prue that the train must stop every 100 miles. She points to the next station where the train will stop, a place with a large water tower. Lucky explains that if they take a shortcut through the mountains, they can reach the station before the train. She also tells them that in order to free the horses, the train has to be stationary. Just then, Abigail arrives and hears the plan. Although both Prue and Abigail are hesitant at first, they eventually agree to help Lucky so she doesn't go on this dangerous adventure alone. The three of them ride out on their horses with Lucky on Spirit. They head through the mountains until they reach a high plateau connected to another by an old, crumbling bridge. They try jumping from a closer point. When it's Lucky's turn, she and Spirit can't make it across and fall into the valley. Fortunately, neither of them is hurt. After a while, Spirit manages to climb back up again. They continue on until they reach a narrow and dangerous rocky path. Lucky trusts Spirit, and he carefully makes his way across, encouraging Prue and Abigail to follow with their horses. They all successfully cross the path and keep going until they reach a spot near the water tower, where they happily decide to camp for the night. The next day, they head to the water tower just as the train arrives. Meanwhile, we see Granger entering his stable where he finds Snaps. Granger learns that Prue, Abigail, and Lucky went to rescue the wild horses from the gang that kidnapped them. Worried about his daughter, Granger rushes to Jim's house and tells him the girls are in danger, explaining what happened. Jim becomes extremely worried for Lucky. He heads to a storage shed beside his house, where he had previously designed a high-speed train car, naming it Mila, after his late wife. He and Granger immediately set off in the train car, speeding toward the rescue. The next morning, Lucky hears the train's whistle while sleeping. She quickly wakes up and sees Spirit running toward the train, realizing it arrived earlier than expected. She wakes up Prue and Abigail, and all three run toward the train. Unfortunately, Hendrix spots Spirit and orders his gang to capture him with ropes and load him onto the train, which they do successfully. Lucky and her friends are unable to save the horses, as the train departs quickly. Lucky feels devastated, especially because Spirit was also taken. But her friends encourage her, reminding her they still have a chance to reach the harbor before the train does. This lifts Lucky's spirits, and she and her friends hurry to the port. There, they find the train and the cargo ship. Lucky manages to climb onto the train and enters the car where Spirit is held. She frees him, but unfortunately, the other horses have already been loaded onto the ship. Lucky and Spirit then leap onto a high platform. At that moment, Jim and Granger arrive at the harbor in the fast train car. When Jim sees his daughter jumping over the ship on horseback, he becomes very worried, especially as the ship begins to sail. Realizing he can't bear to lose his daughter again, Jim and Granger get into a small boat and row quickly after the ship. Meanwhile, Lucky searches for the hold where the gang has kept the horses and manages to reach it and set them all free. At the same time, Hendrix and his gang try to capture Spirit with ropes. When Hendrix manages to tie him up, Lucky climbs onto Spirit and charges straight at Hendrix, knocking him into the sea. Just then, Lucky sees Jim and Granger arriving to save her. Spirit jumps into the water with Lucky, followed by the rest of the horses. When Jim dives in to rescue her, he is surprised to see her safe on the shore, along with all the others. The horses are overjoyed at their freedom. Lucky apologizes to her father, and he apologizes too, telling her that if her mother were alive, she would have done exactly the same. He tells her how proud he is of her, and they share a warm embrace. Later, they return to Granger's place and hand over Hendrix to the police. Finally, Lucky says goodbye to Spirit and the other horses, leading them to the forest where they can live freely in nature. She tears up as she watches them go. When she returns home, her Aunt Cora tells her the vacation is over and that she's packing for their return to the city. Lucky asks her if they can go to the horse festival first. Cora agrees. Lucky wears her mother's dress and makes a wish. Her father tells her that the festival was her mother's favorite. At the festival, Jim goes on stage and tells his daughter that he may have let her go once, but he promises never to do it again. He asks her to stay with him, and Lucky agrees. Everyone cheers at the news. Jim sings to his daughter, and Lucky dances with her friends, full of joy.